Some people say you can't get bold colors with colored pencils. I'm going to show you that's just not true. In this lesson, we'll go over finding bold colors, how to create shadows in color, and creating edges on a bright subject, adding final details for a perfect result. Here's an example of some bright and bold colors I've drawn in the past. This sunflower started out being really pale and very light. As I added more color, I was able to get this brilliant sunshiny yellow. In this red piece, it's just a close-up of a geranium, but every red in the pencil box made an appearance here, with just a little touch of green to set it all off. Let me show you how we are going to draw the flower we'll be working on today. It's a beautiful black-eyed Susan. I don't like the name, but I really like the flower. We'll start out the same way that we worked with the cherry. Just some gesture lines to get an idea of how this flower is set up. It's always good to start loose and big and work toward refined. In the second drawing, I've just added petals loosely and kind of in a squared off way. I've refined it further by adding in the curves on the petals and some of their fold lines. And finally, I did that value study again, so I'll always remember where the lights and darks fall. Once I've got this much done, I can get to a really strong line drawing. I've provided this for you in your class materials, so if you'd like to draw from my drawing, please feel free. You have a photo reference that'll help you along the way. Now you'll notice that there's a real petal taped down here. Let me show you how I do that and why it's useful. I've got a petal pulled from my flower right here, and I'm using plain old packing tape to tape it down. As long as I cover the whole petal with no gaps, it'll stay like this for quite a long time. This one's from a few days ago. You can see that it's started to fade just a little bit. But this gives me a good idea of where I'm going for color. A bright color can be simple or it can be complicated. I think this one's going to be pretty easy. I know that this is a yellow flower. It's going to help me to look straight at the flower, so I'll bend it around so I can see it better. The overall color is a nice, strong yellow, so I'll start there. I'm using 107, which is one of my nice, bright yellows. I'll be noting down the colors as soon as I've finished making my mix, but I don't want to stall the process. I'll brighten it to a more orangey color with 109. It's a nice yellowy orange. And I'm pretty close, but this petal is surprisingly darker than I expected. I forgot to make my color dot. There we go. So I'll add a little bit of 111. It's a little bit more orange, and I think that brings me right to my nice bright color. That's just 3 light layers of pencil, and already we're approaching a really bright tone. There's some other information that I'll need to know about this flower, like the color of the petals on the back. You can see here I've worked them up in a similar way, but they're a little duller and they have a little bit more green. You can see it in the one that I taped down. That'll be useful in our drawing for the petals that are flipping back up, where we can see a little bit of the back. The other things I'll need to note are how to make those dark areas that are the variegations on the petals, those nice dark colors. For that, I used a combination of violet, dark indigo, and a dark violet red. The last thing I need to know is how to shade those petals so I don't take away from their boldness. I'm going to do that by starting with a duller yellow. I'll make a few little marks here so you can see what that will look like. It gives me a subtle variation that'll be perfect for those initial folds in the petals, but I need a little bit more. I'll go to a duller orange. This one is called Burnt Ochre, number 187. I can deepen those little shaded areas with that color, but I'm almost still all the same. It's all orange yellow. So I'll give it a little life by adding a little bit of red in the form of this pink, number 124. I think I like my color combination for shadows, so I'll mark them down. Let's get started by transferring our drawing. This is a tricky flower to draw, so you may want to use the line drawing that I've provided for you. You have a photo reference that corresponds exactly. We're going to transfer this time in color. We'll use the same technique of holding it up to the window and you'll see the ink lines through your drawing paper. We need to know how to choose which colors for transferring. I chose a duller version of my yellow. In fact, the one I picked was 183, my lightest shadow color, and I transferred it lightly on the petals. For those centers, I used a violet, and I transferred as lightly as I could, but my lines came out a little heavy. If that happens to you, let me show you what to do. Just pick up that sticky stuff of yours and blot it lightly, and you can take it back to a lighter tone. The yellow on the petals isn't going to bother anything at all. I used my green to transfer the stem. I sort of have a template now of where my color is going to go. So let's get going on this one. We'll use our stylus. I'm using the smaller end, and I'm using it straight up and down. I'll put it in my paper and just twist. Where I mark these in, I've got dots, and they're not going anywhere. I could put those all around everywhere they go. I don't want them to be white. I want them to be yellow. So I'll use my lighter yellow pencil, drop it in those divots, and give it a twist. Now, no matter how much pigment I put on, I've got yellow dots to stay in my flower. The other thing I want to add before I go too far is a resist. In my flower, I have a yellow edge to these petals where they come down near the center, and I want it to stay yellow. I don't want quite as harsh a delineation as I'll get from the stylus, so I'll just use my yellow pencil. The one I'm choosing is 107, my kind of golden yellow, and I'm pressing hard just here where I have the yellow coming through this purple area. I don't want it to look too formulaic, so I'm going to put it more in some places, a little less in others. The effect that I'll get is that I'll keep that yellow line, and no matter what I put on next, it won't draw through. So that's my start with resist and with stylus. Now I can start building up my shadow tones. I'm going to want to keep my value study nearby because it'll give me a roadmap to lay down my shadows. My color sheet will be much more useful to me if I can see it, so I'm going to keep it right over here near the value study. I'll start by casting in some shadows with my lightest shadow color. This ochre color will help me start to define the petals and their shapes. I won't worry too much about perfection. I just want to start getting a little bit of shape into these flower petals. So I would make my way around this flower, adding those initial shadow lines. I can work them a little bit more with my other two shadow colors that I figured out on my recipe card, delving into the darker parts of the shadows, but not covering everything. When I lay this down first, I just know where to go. I'll add a little bit of that pink color just to remind myself to use it again later. From here, I'm going to use my blending pen. Underpainting is a technique that came from the Renaissance painters. When pigment was so expensive, they often would do an underpainting in gray. It's called grisaille. That works well for colored pencil, but for bright colors, we want to keep it bright. They do the underpainting in grays and then add just a few layers of the bright colors, the expensive pigments. Now I want these petals to look velvety. There's no shine on them. They're just rich and velvet. So I'll start now filling them in with my combination of brights. Without ever really pressing hard, you'll see the bright color begin to pop. Where I made my little resist lines and my dots, I want to show you what's going to happen with those. As I begin to sketch in the color where these petals connect, you'll see those resist lines pop out. See them? They're going to stay no matter what I do now. The center of a Black-Eyed Susan almost looks black, but you know me by now. You know I would never settle for that. So I'm going to mix some violet and some red and a little bit of that dark indigo to get that nice rich color. At this stage, I'm just getting started. I'll work a long while to get these colors exactly as I want them. Let me show you what's going to happen when I begin to fill in the center. All those little yellow dots I created are going to pop right out. So these are the ones that I made with the stylus. It's a slightly different look on those than on the ones that came from the colored pencil. I've worked a few of the petals up a little further, and I have some that are right at the beginning. Here's how the shading is going to look as we start to build it up. I've even added in a little bit of violet to the shading where it needed a little bit more oomph. The reds and purples and blues that have created this dark center give me a nice glowy color. And the next place to go on these petals is just to brighten them up with a little bit more of my basic local color. That's the color that I perceive when I first look at that flower. I can really make them glow. You'll notice that I'm going into that dark area a little bit. There's a little part of the flower where the color kind of bleeds together, and this will achieve it without any extra effort. Let me show you how I got there. With light pencil strokes, I'm just adding color, mixing and mixing until I get a nice varied yellow. Now at this point, I could add a little bit more solvent if I wanted to make those flower petals really silky. What happens with the solvent is I lose my shadow a little. So while it's still damp, I'll just go back in and carve that back out. I'm looking at the flower and I'm looking at my drawing. I want to be sure that I get all the shading detail that I need. Let's finish this petal up too. I'm going to darken the center section. This time I'll underpaint it with the indigo blue. Add a little bit of the violet. And I'll finish it off with this nice dark red. Here's a tip that you might find helpful. When you're drawing a little bigger subject, a piece of tracing paper under your drawing hand will keep you from smearing the colored pencil as you work. Now, one other area I'd like to show you on this particular piece is the stem. I'm going to use the paper tooth itself to help me make the fuzzy stem of this particular flower. I'll start with a little bit of yellow, work in some blue, just like we did when we were making our color wheel. I'll create a little bit of a green here, and then I'm going to use a topper to change the quality of that green to a duller plant green that I like. I'll need to show a shadow here, so I think I'll use my dark indigo to put that in. Voila, a fuzzy stem in just a minute. When you've worked your way all the way around the flower, which will take a little bit of time, it'll look like this. There are some finishing touches you can do that will make all the difference in your work. One of the things that I find really helpful is a card with a hole punched in it. I want to go around and look and make sure that I don't have any place that I have two values that are the same that are separated only by a line. I can see someplace I've made a mistake, and I'll show you how to fix it. What the dot does is help isolate that area. So where these two petals meet, I have exactly the same value and the same color separated by that white line. I'll need to pick one of them to go just a little darker, and it will help peel them apart. One little layer of a darker color, and now it doesn't look like one united petal. They look like two separate petals. As you begin to finish your work, look everywhere and make sure you don't have any of those areas where the exact same color or value are separated only by a line. Let me show you how to handle the texture on that flower center. I've worked it up as a little dark dome, but there's really kind of a hairy, fuzzy texture to it. I'm going to pull that out with two of my dark pencils, number 177 and 157, a dark brown and my dark indigo. I'm going back to my scribbly rough scumble stroke, and I'm just going to add in some texture so that it makes sense. It's really not just a shiny orb. I'm using two colors so it doesn't become flat. And I'm working them up even into the highlight so they look like they stand up right in front of it. I'll darken the little divot that falls in the middle of that sunflower, and it'll get much more 3D look. Now, every one of those dots we made sits on a little stamen. A stamen is like a little stem, and I can pull those back out even after all this color with waxed paper. So here's a dot that's just floating in a black background. It won't take much to give it that little stem that is its stamen. Another thing I might want to do is clean up the edges of my work. You remember from our work on the cherry that we want to use a color that relates to our subject. So I'm going to pick a middle tone. I think I'll use this ochre color because I've used it so much in the shadows. I want to make sure it's really sharp, so I'll be sure I have a nice point on it. And again, I will work from within the petals to pick up a little bit of a line. I don't want it to look like a coloring book, so I'm going to just vary that line. Where a shadow might fall at the edge of one of these petals, I can make my line a little bit darker. And where it's a fold rather than an edge, I don't want to put any line at all. So I can go through and sharpen up lines all the way around. The last thing that I'd like to do is darken some of my shadows. I want to be sure that this drawing really packs a punch. I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I've been working from my value study and I've placed all the shadows. I just want to darken them a little. So I'm going with a dark value, in this case, the mauve color, 249. It's in all of this center and it was in my shadows, and I like it because it's the complement of this orange yellow of my flower. I'm going to add a tiny amount more where I've got my darkest shadows, just to punch them up. It'll really make the lighter colors pop to have darker shadows behind them. So that's about it. Once I've got that all done, I may want to let this sit aside for a few minutes or a few days and come back and take another look. What I like to do is turn it at an angle that is unusual, like sideways. It might say to me, oh, there should be more shadow there, and I can add it in. Once I'm really satisfied with the result, I can just put it in a frame. If it's going to be a while before I frame it, I like to apply a fixative. There are lots of kinds of fixative, but the one I like best is Fine Art Fixative by Krylon. It has a good UV filter in it that will protect the colors in your work for a long time. Here's how to use it. You'll want to hold your work vertically and spray from a distance. Sometimes there are bigger droplets in the spray that we want to drop down in front of the work instead of ending up on it. Spray a couple of times lightly in a horizontal way, a couple of times vertically, and you're done. That's all you need to do to fix your work forever. Now that you have the basics, you have everything you need to get started with colored pencils. I'm Susan Rubin, and this has been Colored Pencil Essentials.